Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. This is the Power of Rhythm, your back to school mornings. So I'm really excited to be sharing this with you and providing you with some really great content that I hope will ease your mornings, right? And bring some flow. So I'm going to just start off a little bit. Of course, my name is Raelee Peirce, and I am the family life coach behind innerlifeparenting.com. And you should have a PDF worksheet, or actually, I think it's a Google Doc that you can make a copy of that goes along with this webinar for today. And basically, that will allow you to follow along, and you can just go ahead and take your notes as we go along. Welcome. So great to have you. And we're just going to have everyone is just going to be able to, hide you can be in mute mode. You can be in, you don't have to show your camera. We're going to record this, and then I'm going to send the recording out to everyone. So I hope that that will work and allow everybody to have the content and watch at their own convenience. So welcome again, and we're going to get started here. Let me go ahead and really, I'm going to be asking some questions. So in the chat, we'll use the chat box. So that way you don't have to feel like you're on the spot or anything. When I put something out there, go ahead and put, right now, it would be great to know a little bit about who's in the audience. So if you want to just put like, do you have young children in maybe the 0 to 7 or 7 to 14 or 14 plus. So if you want to just in the chat, jot down that, and we'll have that, and I can share that with everyone. Again, you're at the Power of Rhythm Back to School Mornings, and I'm going to get started here. So welcome, everyone. I think what I want to share too is just that there are some elements to the idea of rhythm that can be really powerful regardless of the age. But I'm going to start off with a little story. I think if you're familiar at all with something like Waldorf education, we know that heart-to-heart connection and learning through storytelling is very powerful. So I'm going to tell you a story to illustrate one family's morning rhythm. And the children in the story are age 1 and 4. But the idea is that there are elements to rhythm regardless of our ages, even as adults. So we're going to be using those ideas as we go through. So you'll see that on your worksheet if you've printed out or you're using it on your computer. So I'm going to just start with this little tale that will help us really understand rhythm. So here's the story of Anna. And if you just sit back and listen to the little morning rhythm of Anna, and we can all be very envious of Anna's little morning rhythm, but it's very sweet, and it will give us some insight about the power of rhythm. So the same thing happens every morning. Anna gets up, dashes to her parents' room, and snuggles into the covers with her mom and younger sibling for kisses and morning prayers. Then Mama changes her little brother's diaper and gets him ready for the day, while Anna puts on the clothes she picked out the night before. Mama brings the baby to Daddy so she can take her shower and get dressed. Anna helps Daddy put the oats, water, cinnamon, and syrup into the Instapot. She pushes the button and waits for her oatmeal. Next, Anna gets her bowl and spoon from her drawer, while Daddy slices an avocado for baby Sam and sings his favorite song, The Itsy Bitsy Spider. Anna gets her dry lunchbox from the counter. She puts a cloth napkin and a spoon into the box. Just like clockwork, Mama enters the kitchen just when the oatmeal beeps that it's ready. Daddy kisses Mama, baby Sam, and lifts Anna in the air. Have a great day, Anna Banana, he says like always. And then comes her favorite part, the bear hug before he heads to work. Mama puts a few Cheerios and sippy cup of water on Sam's tray, and Sam snatches them up with his chubby pincher finger and thumb and gobbles them up, his palm shoving them into his mouth. Anna is ready for her oatmeal and brings her bowl over for her scoop. Mama has some too. They smile at each other. The kitchen glows from the warm light of the rising sun and the twinkling candle on the table. Today is soup day, Anna exclaims. Mama is happy for the reminder. Yes, and what does that mean? Mama says. I need to bring my carrot to chop or maybe my potato. Okay, grab a potato from the basket and put it in your lunchbox. Mama hands her the banana peel on the table. Mama takes up the bowls and Anna throws away the banana peel and then finds a potato for her lunchbox. Anna stands on her stool at the sink and Mama pours the warm water into the bowls. Anna sings, wash the dishes, wipe the dishes, ring the bell for tea, while she uses the scrub brush and soap to wash the bowls and spoons. Meanwhile, Mama is gathering items for Anna's lunch. Mama wipes Sam's face and says, ready, troops? Anna responds, ready. Anna grabs her lunchbox and they head to the living room to put on their shoes and jackets. Mama has her purse and keys. They walk out the door and Anna is excited to see a huge, dewy spider web on the deck chair with a busy spider spinning her web. Mama and baby Sam want to see too. They all lean over to watch the spider. Sam says, itty. Anna says, yes, it's the itsy bitsy spider, Sam. Then lets Mama say, let's sing our way to the car. The itsy bitsy spider. And off they go to school. So that was my little tale. So something to think about is what were some elements of Anna's morning rhythm that is sticking out for you? You can refer to your worksheet that perhaps were particularly calming. And I think if we think about the story, we had physical connection in the beginning, right? Those snuggles right before the whole rhythm begins. I mean, Anna got up on her own and she came racing into her parents' room, which is so often something that little people do. And as they get older, there's a different impulse for them, right? And so we wouldn't see necessarily, you know, a 12-year-old doing that, depending on the ages of our kids. But we might still have even a 7 or an 8-year-old who would want to have those snuggle time. And then there's some traditions, of course, with dad and that process of dad has his part and his role to play. There's a pace that's happening in this rhythm. And I'm hoping that you're picking up that there's a slow pace or slower than perhaps what we imagine in the morning time when we're super rushed. I mean, it is considered one of the most stressful times for families in their day. And so some other calming elements that were included in this story were the singing. There was some singing. There was probably some singing prayers in the beginning. And then, of course, there was some singing from dad, and there was singing from mom, and even Anna had her own little dishwashing song. And clearly, Anna had a lot of familiarity with the kitchen. She knew some things that came next. So powerful ideas here from the book author. The book is called Heaven on Earth, and the author in that book says, our children are profoundly affected by the life rhythms we determine for them. Children live in the rhythms of their bodies more than we do as adults. And so how our bodies move, the predictability and the repetition provide for us a lot of freedom. So when we think about how does predictability and repetition provide us freedom, that's the question. And we can find that there's a freedom from stress, right? The stress of needing to rush, because if we're leaving it all up to almost like spontaneity, or an unpredictability about the morning, then we almost have a panic. So we're free of that. There's a freedom of having to make last minute decisions, and there's a freedom of having to make a lot of choices because we are hopefully able to make some choices that reduce that feeling of need to be rushed and stressed. And I think the most, one of the things that's so striking about this story is that Anna knew what came next. And so clearly her parents had created some kind of form in their own mind at some point, perhaps when Anna was a little younger, right? Where maybe she was like Sam and observing and part of a rhythm that they had. And then as she got older, elements that she could then do by herself became part of her morning that she knew. She knew where her bowl was, and it was in a place where she could get to it. And I think that's even true for kids who are in elementary school, to have things really easy for them to get to, and for there to be this expectation that they can do for themselves, and that we're accompanying them. We accompany them until they can do it on their own. And I think that's a distinguishing factor between the behavioral approach to parenting versus the developmental approach to parenting. In the behavioral approach, we're looking for children to, we're almost thinking we can discipline them into being more mature. And in the developmental approach, what we're doing is providing conditions in our home life that allow for them to mature. And that's a very interesting paradigm shift, I think. It takes a little bit of time to really think about what that means. But if we think about, if we were to bullet point the list of what Anna's rhythm looked like, in terms of what were the tasks involved, there was the initial snuggles with mom, and then she got dressed, and then started breakfast with dad, started packing her lunch. She ate with her mom and her brother, and they reviewed the day, what was coming up. Anna reminded mom, and then they cleaned up together. And then they got their shoes on, and then they eventually made it to the car. So these are kind of the bullet pointed list. But there were some elements that gave the morning a feeling of flow. And I think this is why rhythm, the word rhythm is really encompassing something different than routine. A routine can be rigid or it can be tied to time. And one of the elements of rhythm that's very beautiful is the idea that we have the end time in mind. So we know what time we need to be in the car. So we need to work backwards from that point. And the whole idea is to give ourselves enough time for both our tasks and our time for connection, and build in a little bit of cushion for the unpredictable. There was an unpredictable element, of course, that happened in the morning that we reviewed in this story. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But there was this slowness and there was an efficiency to the rhythm that we heard. And it gave them this time to have connection together, and the prayers in bed before getting dressed. And they had to do some things in preparation for the day. Anna prepared her clothes the night before, and both parents in this scenario were part of the rhythm, and they each knew what their part was to play in supporting the rhythm. And sometimes that's not always possible. I know when my children were little, I was very fortunate to live with my parents. We all lived in a multi-generational home. And so grandma was there. She had made the coffee and she had the breakfast going. And so we would all come out and have breakfast together. So wonderful when you have that support, but sometimes it's just one parent. So then you have to really think about all the elements and how to simplify as much as you can, because if you're only one parent doing the task of two or more, we know it takes a lot of people to help us support childcare and parenting. And so thinking about who do you have to rely on for that. So in terms of, the other really beautiful thing about this little rhythm was that they got to eat together and the candlelight. And that's such a wonderful tradition that children, it really helps to calm everyone's nerves if we can get to that point, right? Sometimes an element can just add a little too much depending on the personalities and temperaments. So we have to always take in consideration who's at the table and who needs to do what, and who needs to move their body. And maybe there's a run around outside before we can have breakfast or something. So, take in consideration who your child is. Maybe they need that. They need to get that movement out. So the idea is, of course, if we had older children, what elements could be part of a routine that involved an older child? They would know a lot more, right? So as my children got older, they had already picked out their clothes. And we kept their clothes really simplified. For example, we had all of the clothes that they could wear to school. They went to a school where they couldn't have logos or images and things like that from pop culture. So we had school clothes where they could get to them and they knew what they could wear. So there was no question about that. And we discovered that along the way, right? So we had the clothes with things on them. And then when I would see that that was going to be a struggle, that was a real issue with my youngest. He had favorite shirts and he loved things that said words and had pictures. So I knew that, oh, okay, that's a test that like we don't need to add this element of choice and drama to our morning. So I just tucked those things away and they came out for the weekends or during vacation. So those are the preparation things that you want to keep in mind when you're putting together your plan for your rhythm. And older kids are amazing at having the skills now to do cooking. So my kids started around probably second grade and maybe younger with some elements of the cooking, but like in terms of frying an egg, I would say third grade was they were well versed in being around stuff like that. But depending on the capacity of your child, think about what they can do on their own and what they need accompaniment with. And children need accompaniment until they feel like they have that thing, right? And they will tell you, they're like, no, I can do it. And we see that starting to emerge around 2, where they have that initial, like, I can do it. And so that's a really good impulse that we can follow that. We can allow them to take the lead when they have that impulse to do on their own. And so I think the idea too with older children is they can be part of the mapping out of the rhythm. So younger children, we need to take the reins. We're the governor, the benevolent governor of our children under the age of 7. And then as they move into that middle age, 7 to 14, we are the gardener. We have a big heart with big ears, and we do a lot of listening, and we're team players and we collaborate with them. And then, of course, as they get into the teen years, we're more of a mentor, a guide to them, and we're helping support their goals. So having been at all 3 stages now, which is crazy to think, it's really beautiful to see as that develops and their capacities grow. Sometimes you take 2 steps back. I think I am on my way to having, I'm being in the gardener phase, and I'm like, oh, okay, we're not ready quite yet around this element of our lives. I need to be more of a governor in this realm. So it just depends on, your child and what they need. So I think thinking about like the unpredictable moment, there was that little unpredictable thing that happened. I think you can guess it was the spider that was on the deck that kind of paused everyone before they got into the car, right when we thought we were going to get to the car. Of course, there's this amazing natural thing that's happening, and we experience that with kids. I'll never forget the morning that we were coming out of, we had a smooth morning and we're making our way to the van. And I see in the distance this little black pot-bellied pig, like on the dirt road. Now, we're not living in the city, but we're not living like out in the country with like farms. but we know our neighbors, and no one that we know of has a pot-bellied pig. And I just will never forget that we see this pot-bellied pig, and I'm like, guys, look at there's a pig. And it's kind of far away. Like it's just like it looks like a little piglet. It's so cute. And we're all just like, oh, so adorable. And the kids are probably like 7 and 4. And we're standing there and I'm like, oh, let's say hi to the pig. So I'm like, here, little piggy. I'm calling this pig towards us. And it starts running really fast. And it's getting bigger and bigger as it gets closer. And all of a sudden I have this like panic moment. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this could be like Lord of the Flies, like the pig from there. It's like some wild boar or something. And so I go from like, here, piggy, to being like, guys, we got to get in the car. Like, I'll get into the car really quickly. And we like just make it. And the pig is right there. And we're all in the car. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And it was a friendly little pig, but I didn't want to test the waters with that. And so we all said our little hellos from the window. But I still have no idea why there was a pot-bellied pig in our neighborhood. But I just am warning you, like the itsy bitsy spider and things like that. But that was a great conversation all the way to school, of course, was our experience with this pot-bellied pig. And I think if we can take in stride that kids and ourselves, we can get distracted with something and it can cause a little bit of a delay. Um, so there's obviously some qualities that we have to build in as parents around being parents that we all learn pretty quickly, but it doesn't mean that we get to practice them every day, essentially. So if we explore this concept again of rhythm, we often hear routine and schedule, but rhythm might be a new word for you. I'm not sure. Um, and I really love this approach about this word. This word is so beautiful because it is encompassing some really beautiful elements about connection and spirituality. We know that we're rhythmic beings. We're born with a heartbeat and with our breath, breathing in and out, and nature around us. The moon is affected by the tides, or the moon affects the tides. And the seasons, of course, bring these very predictable changes most of the time. And so moving our bodies actually in the same way, in a repetitive way, creates an ability to focus and that sense of security and safety. So when you're in this ability to not have to make a lot of choices and decisions, right? Where we created that freedom by creating this rhythmic way of being in space and time every day in the same way, which isn't always possible with children, right? We know. So, but it was Anna's confidence, sense of knowing that allowed us to know how safe and secure she felt. She knew what was happening. She knew what it meant to get ready. And I think that's really important because it's almost like for Anna, she knew where to put her body. She knew she was going to take her body here and then her body needed to be here. And with her hands, she knew what she needed to put together. So it's moving. And I don't know whether you have ever watched a movie that's very character based, but I absolutely love those scenes where the character is they you kind of watch them go through steps and you can see that that's something that's very calm, like very familiar to them. The way that they put the teapot on the table and just where they put the tea bag and their spoon and their honey. And like you're watching this person do a very mundane thing, but in a very beautiful way. And it's really about taking the mundane and making it meaningful through the process of being in the moment. So it's very mindful, right? So this idea, and I love that what we're learning as parents is that when Anna knows what happens, when she knows what comes next, she doesn't have anxiety. She's not as anxious because it's putting her in control of what's happening and what's coming. And I love that rhythm isn't about, it's not obsessed with time. It's just about the sequence of what comes next rather than, oh, we have to have breakfast on the table. I mean, these can be anchor moments where you can say, so that we can get into the car, you can have in your mind, if you have to be in the car by 7:50, then let's say it takes your child a little time to get breakfast. So maybe you have to be at the breakfast table by 7:20. But those are all for the parent to kind of have in mind, um, as you move your bodies in the same way as much as you can, right? It's not perfect because, as we know, we have to be flexible with young children. So I guess we have to ask the question, how would Anna know what comes next? And what do we think we have to do then to create that kind of predictability in a child? And as I had said before, clearly parents had, a morning where they talked about what this would look like, and they probably accompanied her until these things could take form. And yet also knowing that if something has too much form and too much guidance, it can get into that sense of rigidity. And so we want to make sure that there's a balance of guidance and freedom in this rhythm. And one way for us to know how to do that, because it's one thing to say, great, great, Raelee. Yeah, how do you create balance of not too much form and guidance and, make sure it comes with freedom? That's such a beautiful idea. So one of the metaphors that we can use is this idea of breathing. So there's a breath in and there's a breath out. And if we can remember that as humans, in any rhythm, whether it's our morning rhythm, our afternoon rhythm, our evening rhythm, we do really well if we set up our day and our tasks and the way that we live with this idea that we need to be breathing in and then we need to breathe out. And that has to do with our habits and with our tasks. So we know that our morning rhythm is made up of a series of habits that awaken the body, the mind, and the spirit to each task. So that's very beautiful to just sit and think about. And a breath in, when we breathe in, it's an inward activity. Think about that breath in when you're doing a task as an inward activity, or another way to call it would be a being activity that is self-directed. So, and a breath out would be an activity, an external activity, or a doing activity. And it may not be self-directed. It may be to do for someone else or guided by someone else. So in a sense, we're setting up a rhythm for the morning or for the afternoon or for evening, but we're focused on the morning. We move from being tasks to doing tasks. So a breath in and a breath out. And this is going to help us with giving us balance. So if we use Anna's rhythm to find the breathing in and the breathing out examples, you have a few there where it says, okay, is this a breathing in or breathing out? I'm going to go through all of them. And I think you have maybe 3 of them listed there, and you'll hear which ones are what. So Anna gets up, and that was self-directed. So there's a little gnat in here. Okay, and so that would be the breathing in, right? So she woke up, she breathed in, and then she goes and she snuggles in the covers with her mom for kisses and morning prayers. And that's not self-directed. That was with others and it was in coordination with people. So that would be a breath out. And then Anna puts on her clothes and she did that on her own. So that would be a breath in. And then Anna helps Dad put out the oats and the water, the cinnamon, the syrup into the Instapot, and she pushes the button. She waits for her oatmeal, and she gets out her bowl and her spoon. All of that is a breath out. She's doing something for Dad, and she's getting things ready, and she's in a doing activity. Even though it's a little self-directed, it's not, because dad's there, and it's just more of an activity that is requiring a little bit more help. She couldn't have done all of that by herself. And then dad sang the Itsy Bitsy Spider song to Sam. And of course, that was really lightening the mood. And so that's a great breath out. And dad kisses everybody goodbye and says, have a great day. And that's another really wonderful breath out for Anna. So lots of breathing out in this space. And then Anna's ready for her oatmeal, and they get to sit and she's eating her oatmeal. It can be both a breath in and a breath out. She's both self-directed and she's also participating with mom in that moment. And they're having a great chat about the day, which could also be both breathing in and breathing out. And then they clean up. So she's washing the dishes and wiping, and she's singing, and that's a really lovely breath out for her. And again, mom is helping too. And Anna grabs her lunchbox and they all go together. Mama's guiding them out the door, so a nice breath out to get outside. And they have a little bit of a breath in as they all look at the spider, and they have kind of this moment of just kind of like watching this spider. And then they sing Itsy Bitsy Spider all the way to the car, and that's a great breath out. And the ride to school is actually a breath in. You have to be kind of in a space where, something that is recommended for young children is, especially nowadays when we have so many spaces that are very sensory overload, is actually to have the car be a quiet space and a time for connecting. Of course, when they get older, it's great because you have them trapped in there and you get to talk with them. It's awesome. But when they're little, just giving them space to be in their head, watching outside, because it is a breath in. They've done a lot to get ready and get in this moment before they're heading into the school. And so giving them some quiet time rather than maybe music or NPR or anything that would be really like overstimulating. It'd be really great to just have them have that time to just, it's a little bit of just kind of like but still a breath in, because they're in a car seat and they kind of have to be still for a little while. And so that can be a lot for them. And then when they get out, the best place for them to of course go is when they get to school, is I am hoping that whatever school they go to, they get to have a breath out, which would be outdoors, would be ideal for them when they first arrive. It's really hard on little people when they first arrive at school to like be told to get at a desk and start writing. I'm like, oh gosh, that's hard to hear. So, hopefully they're breathing out. So as you think about creating your own morning rhythm this year, keep in mind this metaphor, breathing in and breathing out. This is a beautiful way for us to figure out how we're managing the time. And thinking too about the qualities that we have to have with our children during these times, because we're practicing predictability and repetition. And that takes a lot of self-discipline. So that is a test, because sometimes we want to be spontaneous, or we just want to sleep in a little bit more, or, there's so much that is hard about, being a parent. We're on and they're modeling after us, and we have to be worthy of imitation. And that's a tall order. And so we're also thinking about this beautiful slowness that I described in caring for the mundane, but in a very beautiful way. There's another book that describes the parent or the teacher, like we are like the sun, and the children are kind of like they're just kind of floating around us, and we're glowing and we're warm and we're going slowly, and it's just we put out a lot of wonderful energy, and they pick up on that. And so if we're moving really quickly and really stressed and we're just like, oh my gosh, where are my keys? And where you were supposed to do, that energy is what sets the emotional climate. And so if you think about the temperature gauge, that's really creating stress. And it's not that that will never happen. Let's face it, life happens and we have mornings like that. The goal here is striving to reduce that and bringing in this really beautiful presence and slowness and predictability and repetition. And that requires us then in the moments where we need it is to be flexible because it won't always go the way. And there may be some mornings with some tears and some challenges, and we have to bring out, our patience and our companionship in companioning our child through hard emotions. But I think one aspect that I keep being reminded is how we actually set the tone of this energy that our children feel. So if we can rein in and do work before the morning, that will help us, right, with the clothes and getting maybe lunches packed even the night before, setting up the oatmeal if we're going to have oatmeal or whatever breakfast, thinking about what would be simple and what does my child like to eat and what will be hearty for them. These are all the important questions that you get to be the architect of your own rhythm. Now, something that I think is really interesting is that the morning actually begins the night before. I know that sounds weird, but yeah, sleep is so critical. And we know that that's something that we all, as parents, we lack the most is good sleep. And it's just so crucial because the start of a child's day is this night before. And when we lack sleep, then we might get up a little late or we might create more stress for ourselves because now we feel like we're feeling rushed. We don't have the energy. So this is tough, but rhythm can be very forgiving too. And that's one reason to build in the repetition and the predictability and not be so spontaneous. Because when everybody knows what to do, you can be in a little bit of a sleepy mode and you're just kind of going through some motions, but you can light the candle. There can be some beautiful things. Maybe there's that little sweet song that you all know, some good prayers to get you through. But we do know that, when we can not feel rushed and we can be present, that this can ease our anger and our frustration. Children aren't able to really imitate us as well when we move too quickly. And it can be very disorienting for them. So when we're moving really fast and we're getting a lot done doing that, we have to remember that they're trying to follow us. They're trying to go where we need. And sometimes what they can do is just shut down. They kind of almost become immobile where you're like, come on, we got to go. And they're just kind of like, like it's almost like their off button is off. So moving slowly and moving with joy and moving in this flexible, patient, present way actually really encourages them to follow and they see it as doable. I think too, when there's that lack of anxiety. And I think we're seeing a lot more children, unfortunately, have anxiety, which is just so sad. And when we think about anxiety is about not knowing the future, right? And we know that some recent worldwide events created a lot of anxiety for everyone. And so something for us to do to heal is in our own homes, we can do a lot to help our children know what's coming next and not create a sense of instability or unpredictability around that. So I hope that you've picked up that the key here to your morning rhythm will be in the repetition. And your child can see that yesterday, today, and tomorrow are all something that they can recognize so that that can really reduce this feeling of stress and anxiety. So thank you so much for joining me today. And I'm going to remain here. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. And if there's any questions or thoughts, and we will explore that together. You have a worksheet that can help you walk through your own rhythm. And I hope that everything goes well for this year in school. And thank you again so much for joining me. So let me go ahead and stop recording and take care.